Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 5 of season 3 of Game of Thrones called Kissed by Fire. Overall, this is a really good episode. I really enjoyed it. Lots of cool stuff happening with all the characters. So, I've got my notes. I've got a nice tasty drink. So, let's get right into it. And, might as well start with what's going on with Arya. I think that was some of the more interesting things that we had happen in this episode. So this is our big fight between Sandor and Dondarrin. And I gotta ask, when Dondarrin did that thing with the sword, am I the only person out there who just immediately thought, "Form blazing sword"? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you probably didn't watch cartoons back in the 80s, so don't worry about it. Anyway, that was quite a good fight, very cool. I was a little expecting the Hound to get kind of freaked out by fire quite a bit more soon than he did. He handled that situation a little bit better than I thought he would, but he did certainly kind of freak out there a little bit towards the end. But still, I suppose now that he's not working for Joffrey, maybe it's not 100% fair to keep calling him the Hound. So I'm going to try and call him Sandor from now on. So of course, Sandor ends up winning the fight and is, relieved of his money, but sent along his merry way. And this is spoiler, not the last that we're going to see of this guy. And actually, I'm quite interested to see how this goes, because if you've read the books like I have, that you know that there's quite a few more interesting things in store for Sandor. And I suppose I should take this moment to remind everybody that I have indeed read all the books, but it's been more than I've only read them once, and it's been it's been about 2 years since I read any of them. I think that's when Dance with Dragons came out. So if I'm a little fuzzy on the details, or if I forget something, do forgive me. Also, I'm not going to spoil anything big from the books, but I might occasionally talk about some of the details. So if you want to remain 100% spoiler free from the books, now would be the time to turn away. So anyway, after all that, we get to see more of Arya, obviously very upset at Sandor. But we also get to see a really nice scene with her and Gendry. And, as one of the notable things about the Game of Thrones series is that it really sucks to beat Arya. Every time she thinks she has something good going, it just never lasts. But it's sort of funny that here in the show, things actually seem to be going reasonably well for Gendry and Hot Pie. At least for now, you never know. Happy endings are not the norm in this universe. But I really did like that scene between her and Gendry, and some people are very big on the shipping elements of that. That's not really my thing. I just simply like the way that she said, "I could be your family," and you have to stop and think about it. Sansa and like Arya has been separated from everybody, that her whole family she saw. Basically, she didn't exactly see Ned die, but she was there when it happened. And for what it's worth, Gendry and Hot Pie are kind of as close as she's got to a replacement. And she's obviously, has a good bond with Gendry. She obviously, has a great deal of respect for him. And just doesn't really want to lose the one real friend that she has left in the whole world. Especially, considering that she also has pretty good reasons to be sort of pissed at the Brotherhood without banners, even though, relatively speaking, they are good guys. But Gendry's response to her is very telling. One, he kind of makes a very good point about how he's tired of being a servant. He's tired of having to serve somebody like he has been his entire life. But his real point is that, you'll always be, he'll always consider, Arya his lady. And in a way, this sort of reminds me a little bit of the relationship between Brienne and Renly. But basically what Gendry is saying here, in my mind, is that Arya is basically offering to treat him as an equal. And Gendry is saying, no, we come from completely different worlds. We can never really be equals. And he's not saying that in a bad way. He's not condemning her in any way. He's just simply stating a matter of fact. Gendry, despite his heritage, which is of course completely unknown to him, is a commoner, and Arya is a noblewoman. I mean, her dad is the Lord of Winterfell, one of the biggest dudes in the Seven Kingdoms. These are two people from completely different worlds, and as close as they are, and their friendship is genuine, that's always going to be there. So, that's a very telling comment on life in Westeros, I guess. Okay, so let me see. Alright, since we're talking about Starks, let's go to our unofficial Stark and talk about what's going on with Jon Snow and Ygritte. Jon Snow still getting some crap from the guys from the Wildlings, and the dude from Pirates of the Caribbean. But obviously, he's very much won Ygritte to his side, and that results in some fun, sexy times for Jon, and some fan service for the viewers. So, but no, I actually did really enjoy the scenes between them in this portion in the books. It really does show that, Jon being faced with this, this temptation, the things that he could have if he really does 100% embrace what the Wildlings are offering him. And of course, hot red-haired girl, that's a pretty big temptation to wave in front of a guy like Jon, especially his age, who's never been with a girl or anything like that. But it's also, of course, we're going to see that just how far that Jon is willing to go to maintain his mission of infiltrating the Wildlings. Now, we're presented with two sides of this. The one having to give information about the strengths and weaknesses of the Night Watch, and we're also presented with the side where, oh, okay, the hot girl wants to sleep with me. Well, you can't say that life never threw you at least one good break, can you, Jon Snow? But anyway, I think that covers everything I got to say about Jon. What's going on there? Oh yeah, I almost forgot. I also really liked the comment Arya makes about, could you bring back a man with no head? And you really have to stop and sort of... That really serves to remind us that, at the end of the day, Arya is, about 12 years old at the time this is happening? She's like, at most, 12, 13, a 7th grader? At most? You can still see a little bit of that child in her. And what happens when Dondarn is brought back after being killed by Sandor? I also like this in that it shows that magic in the Game of Thrones universe is not necessarily 100% bad. On the other hand, the gods and powerful things in the... Let's just go with gods in the Game of Thrones universe. I think it would also be extremely foolish of us to simply assign such simplistic labels as good and bad to them. Look at what's going on here. We can see the power of R'hllor used to bring Dondarn back to life, but we've also seen that same power used by Melisandre to, whammy up a shadow demon that killed Renly. So again, really, we should not put such simplistic labels on the gods in the Game of Thrones universe. Which I like, because this is indeed very in keeping with the how should I put it? I can't say the H.P. Lovecraft mythos, because obviously this has its own gods and such. But the perspective, let's put it that way, the perspective that Lovecraft had on the beings in his mythos was that these are things so utterly alien that humans can't even begin to comprehend their motives and goals and desires. And while we might use some of their power for our own ends, be it good or bad, usually bad in H.P. Lovecraft stories, because, whatever you want to say about the guy, he wasn't the most optimistic person in the world. But, again, that these beings are not something that can be slapped with simple labels like good and evil. And, let me see. Okay, so, yeah, let's keep talking about the Starks. Let's briefly talk about Robb. And, here we get to see Robb obviously very much influenced by Ned and what he does with Karstark after he kills the 2 Lannister boys. And, once again, we get this scene where somebody points out, it's like, look, if you're just willing to compromise a little, things will be so much better for you and everybody else. And, of course, Robb is like, no, honor says I have to kill this guy. And, of course, that does not go well for him, which leaves Robb having to go off and have a chat with with Walder Frey. I just keep always wanting to call him Argus Filch because he's played by the same guy who did that character in the Harry Potter movies. But I'm certainly not going to say no to more Walder Frey. Walder Frey is a complete and utter bastard, but he's a very entertaining complete and utter bastard. So yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing some more Walder Frey, and this definitely leaves Robb in the awkward position of having to negotiate a big favor from a guy he's already broken his word to. And of course, this is a major contradiction because here we see Robb very much, I have to go with what honor says, and then immediately has to turn around and deal with the guys like, oh, well, okay, there was that one time I didn't do the honorable thing, and yeah, this is going to be interesting. And if you read the books, you know why this is going to be interesting. So that's something to look forward to. Okay, I think that covers basically everything we got to say about, oh wait, we forgot Sansa as usual. Again, not really a whole lot going on with Sansa this week. It's just like, God, Sansa, how naive can you possibly be, as usual? But I think we've kind of become accustomed to that with Sansa, right? Oh, but speaking of her, this is a perfect opportunity to go and have a little chat about what's going on with the Lannisters. So we might as well start off, since he's tied to her this episode, talking about what's going on with Tyrion. First of all, we get this really great scene between him and Olenna, and I was like, oh man, Tyrion and Olenna in the same room, this is going to be great. And it was pretty good, but it was mostly on Olenna's part. She completely owned that scene. She completely owned Tyrion. And I just love the fact that she even calls him like a browbeaten bookkeeper. And the thing is, though, that's not really a charge Tyrion can deny. I was actually talking with a friend of mine about this episode last night, and this came up. And after everything that's happened, Olenna's really right on the mark here. Tyrion is not himself, really, in many ways. He's been physically injured. He's, psychologically not in a good place, and really, his dad is just stepping all over him. He really is, at this point, just a browbeaten bookkeeper. Far cry from a guy who, with words, was able to get an army of wildlings on his side. A far cry from the guy who basically saved King's Landing. And a guy who went in there and basically told his dad, like, Dad, enough of this BS, you need to make me heir of Casterly Rock. But Tywin being Tywin, he's managed to knock Tyrion down a peg, and Tyrion has not managed to get himself back up on his feet. Now, of course, it is a real credit to Tyrion as a character, and when Tywin says, like, you know what, Tyrion, you're gonna marry Sansa Stark, that he immediately brings up, like, basically says, like, wait a minute, this poor girl has suffered enough. And of course, it's very telling of Tywin that his immediate reaction is, it's not my job to care about her happiness. I mean, that really tells you quite a bit about the guy. Not that we didn't already know he wasn't a dickweed, but still. So, what I also love about that scene is that Tywin basically confirms what he said last episode, and what I've always what he said last week about Cersei, not being as smart as she thinks she is. I mean, when that scene starts, she's sitting there with a big old smirk on her face. It's like, ha ha, Tyrion, Dad's about to make your life suck, and I'm going to sit here and enjoy it. And then Tywin immediately turns around and says, "Oh, by the way, Cersei, you're going to marry Sir Loras and pop out at least a few more kids by him." And her reaction to this is to immediately protest once and then immediately start begging. It's like, Cersei, you are just proving your dad right. You are 100% proving him correct that you are not as smart as you think you are, and that he can boss you around as much as you like. I mean, seriously, you protest and then you're immediately begging Daddy to take pity on you. Now, I think I've made it clear that I am not a fan of Cersei. But, again, what I like about the characters in Game of Thrones, and this is one of the things that a lot of people like, is that even the bad characters are human. Like, to me, Cersei is a villain, but there are times when I do feel bad for her. I certainly don't approve of the fact that Robert would sometimes hit her, and it is pretty cruel what Tywin is doing here. I mean, she even says to him, "Father, don't make me do it again." She does not want to enter into another loveless marriage and start having kids by some guy who doesn't give a real rat's ass about her, and who is basically probably going to spend most of their time together pining for somebody else. Only the real difference here is that Sir Loras would probably be pining for Renly. Although, apparently he's doing a better job of moving on about it. Or maybe not, given that Robert certainly enjoyed his time with folks of well, basically, let's call a spade a spade. Robert liked himself the whores. And well, Oliver or Polliver or whatever his name was works for Littlefinger. So yeah. But yeah, you can't help but feel just a little bit sorry for Cersei when she says that. And give Leona Headley some real credit. That is a really nicely done scene by her. So let's see. Yes, we have one more Lannister that we need to talk about, and that is, of course, Jaime. And what I like about the scene between him and Brienne is, one, while there is nudity in it, it is not the sort of hey, sexy fun time nudity that we got out of Ygritte. There is genuine reason, in part for the story, for why these two characters don't have their clothes on when this scene takes place. And this is important, of course, because we finally get to hear Jaime's side of the story about why he killed the Mad King. And it is an extremely compelling story. And the thing is, though, that after losing his hand is really in the book series where Jaime really starts to come in focus as a character. And hearing his side of that story is a big step in that. Jaime, really, if you look at it from his perspective, Jaime's a hero. He killed a lunatic person who got off on burning people alive and was really about to give the order to have thousands of people, men, women, and children, burned to death just because he was that damn crazy. And then, of course, Jaime takes this guy out, and as soon as he does, who walks in but the one guy in probably all the Seven Kingdoms who, from Jaime's perspective anyway, would not believe one word of Jaime's story. Now, I think Jaime's being a little unfair to Ned here. Now, granted, Ned is all about honor, even to the point of honor before reason. But let's stop and think for a moment. You think that Ned, if Jaime had said, "Look, let me at least listen to my side of the story," do we really think that Ned wouldn't have at least heard this guy out? I mean, Ned was big on being fair. And would he really have been able to say that he was being fair if he didn't at least listen to what Jaime said? And I can't help but think that if he had, then Ned would have found himself in the same place as Brienne. I was wondering, if I had been in that position, would I have been able to do anything else but what Jaime did? And of course, this is all really tied up in at the final bit of that scene. When Jaime starts to pass out, Brienne yells for help, like the Kingslayer needs help, and Jaime starts going, "Jaime, my name is Jaime." Jaime wants people to think of him as something besides, an oath breaker and a murderer. He wants people to think of him as a person. And this is a scene in both the books and in the TV show, of course, that wins Jaime a lot of fans. But we also need to keep in perspective all the things that Jaime has done. I mean, this is a guy who also likes to bang his sister, and was perfectly cool with throwing a kid off a tower in order to be able to continue to bang his sister. And oh yeah, let's also not forget that TV Jaime is also a kinslayer. Now, to be fair, he doesn't do that in the book. And this again kind of comes back to what when I was talking about this episode with my friend last night. And I said to him, in my mind, Jaime is a guy who is willing to do bad things that benefit him personally, but he sort of does not approve of bad things in the abstract. So yeah, Jaime is against the Mad King sending out his forces to burn children alive. But if it comes to killing a kid to protect his secret about banging his sister, he's perfectly willing to do that. So, things are all very relative. And again, this is one of the things that I like about the universe, that even the bad guys have this depth to them, and even the good guys have darkness in them. There was this interview that I read with I saw on YouTube one time with George R.R. Martin, and he perfectly stated one thing that I happen to believe about fiction. And basically it goes like this, that characters don't have to be likable for them to appeal to audiences. They just have to be interesting. And and that's really true. There are a lot of characters in Game of Thrones who are complete and utter bastards. The kind of people that you'd want to see thrown to a pack of wild dogs. Littlefinger. But they are interesting. Like, if they exist in the real world, people like Jaime and Cersei and Littlefinger, you'd want them thrown in prison for the rest of their lives and throw away the key. But they don't exist in the real world. They're just fictional characters. So that makes it okay to enjoy them. You know what? I think I've made my point. So let's just kind of keep going on. Let me see here. Yes, of course. We need to go and have a little talk about what's going on with Stannis. And this is actually a pretty strong episode for Stannis. Excuse me. We get to see him talking with his wife, who, if I remember correctly, she was seen last year, but she was just played by some nameless extra who didn't have any lines. Here she's recast with a real actress, given lines and stuff. And the one thing I noticed about her that's different from the books is well, okay, in the books she's much more of a holy roller. Wait a minute. Roller. Maybe there is something there, but anyway. She's much more of a grabbing her pearls kind of crazy in the books. Here she's a little bit more subdued, but is still equally batshit. And the stuff with the keeping the dead babies in the bottles of that stuff? Asbestine or I can't pronounce it. That really creepy green liquor that smells like licorice, and was banned in a whole bunch of countries forever because it would had mercury in it and would drive you crazy. Asbestine. Okay, yes, it's probably just formaldehyde or something like that, but still, it's much more fun that that she's pickling those kids and the kind of booze that used to drive Victorian writers insane. Or maybe, that just is the sort of idea that appeals to my particular sensibilities. Which, if true, really tells you something possibly disturbing about me, but, c'est la vie, right? Anyway, the other thing that we get to see, of course, is Sherry, I should say. And, last year, there was a lot of people who were talking about, like, does she even exist in the TV show universe? And from what I gathered, people seem to think, like, no, it doesn't look like she exists. Well, here we get confirmation that Stannis' daughter does indeed exist. And what's nice about Sherry is that she's really the only place where Stannis ever shows that softer side of himself. Now, granted, we've seen a tiny bit when he confessed that he really did want Melisandre. But here we get to see, that Stannis is, at the end of the day, to at least someone, just a dad, and that his daughter, she's a real sweetheart. And Stannis obviously cares deeply about her, but this is not a guy who does emotion well. And there's also the fact that he's basically locked her up just because she has the ravages of a disease. I believe in the books it was called grayscale. Now, maybe it's worse. The description in the books always struck me as it being worse than what we see here in the show. Now, granted, here in the show, it's a little bit kind of like Cherie might kind of grow up to acquire a fondness for constantly flipping a coin and trying to kill Batman, but still, it's reasonably well done. And her interaction with Davos, and just like asking your dad, like, "Hey, what's going on with the Onion Knight? Did he bring me a souvenir?" Again, that really does bring some nice positive energy to this. A little innocence, a little bit of naivete, that's not worrying and tiresome like what we get with Sansa. And of course, this also gives us a chance to check in with Davos and see him. Davos is still a good guy. He's trying to do the right thing. And this also starts Davos down the road of learning to read. And yeah, this is actually somewhat important. So let's see. Does that cover everything that I had to say? Just looking at my notes here. Ah, yes. Almost forgot. Of course, we have to go and pop over and see what's going on with Dany. Not too much going on there. We just see that Dany's two advisors don't necessarily like each other, and we're also introduced to the character of Grey Worm. Now, I was really happy about this. Grey Worm's actually I was expecting him to look older, but that's just the impression of the character that I got from the books. Grey Worm does a really nice job of selling why he wants to hang on to his the unsullied name that he has, and just his genuine enthusiasm for wanting to serve Dany was really nicely well done. It really crystallizes that the Unsullied are 100% doing this of their own free will. And there's also some stuff down the line that shows us like, yeah, Grey Worm's a pretty badass dude. So I'm hoping we'll get to see some more of that. Because the Unsullied are actually an extremely interesting element of the Game of Thrones universe, and I would definitely like to see more of that in the show. But that definitely does wrap up everything that I had to say about this episode. Again, another really nicely done one. Definitely looking forward to the next episode. So anyway, folks, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at HoosierJedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.